everyone, to Christiana's Psychic Cafe. We've been having some technical issues. You notice what you're looking at apparently is a picture of me and the beach in Fiji, or something like that. But I am here, and, interesting, I was very excited to announce that this is, I think this week or last week, somewhere there, would be our 6-month anniversary doing Christiana's Psychic Cafe and doing it here on Para Encounters Network. So we're really excited about that. Eric, you and I have lasted together longer than some marriages have. What do you think?
Yeah, except neither one of us have the money they had in those marriages. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think we've had a very good, very working relationship. It's a high quality show. People always walk away with something new that they've learned, and that's what we're all about here at PEN. And you've been a peach to have around, Christiana.
A peach, awesome. So I apologize that I can't give you live video today, but I just want you to pretend that you are listening to a radio show with cool pictures. And that being said, I am so excited to have our guest here on the phone tonight. In just a moment, we are going to welcome Mary Wilson. Mary Wilson has changed my life, I am not exaggerating, and hopefully she'll change yours as well. Mary is the editor and founder of Jupiter Gardens Press. Jupiter Gardens Press, of course, is the publisher of my 2 tarot books, Fortune Stellar and Tarot Tour Guide. Jupiter Gardens Press publishes a lot of different genre, a whole lot of stuff. She's going to tell us all about it. Mary is also the Muse Charmer, and we'll let her tell us what that means. Hi, Mary. Thanks for being on Christiana's Psychic Cafe.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it is great to have you here. Well, first of all, tell me where you are in the world.
I am in the Ozarks. I am about 600 yards from Arkansas. I'm right on the Missouri-Arkansas border.
Wow. How's the weather there?
Oh, it was beautiful today. Sunny skies. Finally got a break from the heat. It was gorgeous, postcard perfect.
Wow. Very nice. So we, here in the Tampa Bay area in Florida, we are having some serious thunder and lightning, which we think might account for our technical issues tonight, but that won't stop us here at Christiana's Psychic Cafe. And I see in the chat room in Arizona, 120 degrees. I will take the thunder and lightning, thank you. So, Mary, we always like to start our show with a card of the day, or card of the week, actually. What I do is I pull one card at random, and we talk about it. For people who are studying tarot, it's a way of learning something more about a particular tarot card. And we sort of take it as a reading for the week. So I am shuffling. And we're going to have some fun with this. I have pulled at random the card of the week, Major Arcana 18, the Moon. What do you think of that, Mary?
Oh, that's one of those secret cards. That tells us that there's stuff going on that we might not see under the surface. There's mysteries and things to figure out. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. And it's so funny, depending on the tradition that you come from. Some people see this card as a warning, something very negative, something afoot that is not, certainly as not all as it seems. I think we all agree on that when you look at the moon, you're seeing things are not all as they seem. Things in the moonlight look different than they do in daylight. But some people see this as a very negative card. Other people see it as a card that could be either positive or negative. Other people see it as a wholly positive card. What do you think, Mary?
Well, I see it as a positive card because the moon does not give off any light of its own. What we see is reflected light off the moon. And so to me, this card is kind of reflecting our inner self and kind of tells us to go deeper and see what's underneath the surface of our daily lives.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Go deeper. Absolutely. I agree. I do see the moon as a warning in the sense that you want to be careful about what's being presented to you. It is possible, especially in the guise of spirituality, that some things that are presented to you may not be what you think they are. And so it does tell you to be careful, to give things a second look, a third look. In the chat room, Shauna is saying she's been getting this card all week and doesn't seem too happy about it. Mary Ellen is here. She was a guest last week on the show. And she's saying lots of people that she reads for sees the card and they love it. They say, oh, I love the moon. I think the moon tells us to, just as Mary Wilson says, to look deeper. I think it tells us to trust our intuition and to follow the spiritual path, to really listen to the voice of spirit. So that's our card for the week. And I think that's funny, too, that it has this sense of the things that are unseen. And actually, what's unseen right now is me. But, that's how tarot works. It always reflects exactly what's going on. So, Mary, there is so much I want to ask you today. I'm so excited to have you here. And before we get going with my humongous list of questions, I would like to ask you just very briefly to tell us about your businesses. Tell us about Jupiter Gardens Press and tell us about the Muse Charmer.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start with the publishing company because that's the older of the two businesses, and it's near it. I love what I do completely, but the publishing company is kind of the icing on the cake. Jupiter Gardens Press was founded almost 5 years ago now, and it may actually be 5 years. I lose track of time, but it was started actually to be a publisher in the New Age metaphysical genres because I had written a book as Mary Kilstow on animal Reiki, and it had been published, and the publisher decided to discontinue that line. And I thought, wait a minute. I have the publishing contacts, and then I have, I've been in the pagan Wiccan / New Age community for 20 plus years. And so I was like, I can do this, and I can bring these books that really need to find their audience to light. And so that's how we started. Some of our first titles were Flower Power by Sandra Cox, which is a fascinating kind of cross-section of gardening and flower lore. And then another book is a book called One Foot in Heaven by Heidi Telpner, who is, it's an accounting of her work as a hospice nurse. And it's a very beautiful story, or a series of stories about how as a hospice nurse she approaches compassion and caring, and even the eventual passing of her clients because she is a hospice nurse. And so we did that, and then I slowly added in the other genres. As a published romance author, I added in the romance. And then also as other authors have presented projects to me, I have worked those into my catalog. And so now we publish young adult, romance, the nonfiction, which I consider the core of the business or the heart of my business. And then we also do some children's pagan books as well as some science fiction and fantasy. And the Muse Charmer kind of is an outgrowth of my work as an author and a publisher. I've been electronically published since 2002, or as I like to tell people, since Moses was handed the Kindle. It's been that long ago. And so I have the knowledge and the ability coming up as a writer. I've networked with a lot of different authors. And so the Muse Charmer is my way of sharing my 10-plus years of knowledge as an author and a publisher with other writers, some of whom may actually go on to self-publish. And so, as I like to say, I help authors create lives as inspired as the stories they write, because I really kind of combine my interest in the spiritual and the metaphysical with the publishing, with even tapping into some other, like the coaching industries, and really kind of help authors find a synergy of different ways to kind of help them grow the careers that they want.
Now, we are putting your websites on the screen, but your Muse Charmer website is musecharmer.com, is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Okay, and I was there. It's a great website, and you have this really wonderful introductory video. So when you go to the website, musecharmer.com, the first thing you can do is click on a video, and there's Mary, just so personable and so comforting, telling us about what you do. And one of the things that you talk about is finding your guardian muse. Can you tell us about what that means?
Sure. The writers actually have, we're superheroes. I mean, it takes a lot of work to write books, and we actually have the 9 superpowers of the muse. And one of those superpowers is the guardian muse, who basically, in my mind, I picture mine as Gandalf. But I mean, if you're not as big a geek as I am, you can choose your own image. But your guardian muse is basically standing between you and the outside world, and it looks at everything and says, you know, is this, well, to tie it back into the card of the week, you know, is this your authentic self? Is this what's beneath the surface that you really want? Does this help your career? And then the guardian muse helps you to make those boundaries or make those decisions. In fact, the free ebook actually goes through 4 or 5 things that you can do to find your guardian muse, which talks about, for example, you know, getting rid of guilt. If you have to say no to something because you need to work on your family or deal with, you know, your writing career, don't be guilty about that. And then it goes through talking about setting boundaries and finding out kind of where you want to go in your writing space and where you really don't want to go, so you can focus on what serves you best. And so your guardian muse is just kind of that little inner voice. It's not the inner editor, but it's the inner voice that says, you know, you're good. You can come into the writer space. No, we don't really want to go there. And it kind of helps you sort out and calm down with as busy as our lives are.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I've actually posed the question in the chat room, what does your guardian muse look like? Our phone number is 615-692-1262. Although the cameras aren't working, the phones are. Feel free to chat in or call in if you want to talk about your guardian muse or if you have any questions for Mary. I got a question. Well, I have a comment and a question. First, my comment, you're talking about your guardian muse looking like Gandalf. I have to tell you that, you know, right away I was thinking, okay, what does mine look like? And I flashed on this image, and I don't really know. I'm going to have to go through some pictures. But I feel like I'm looking at some old feminist writer, like a really old, stern-looking woman, is sadly my guardian muse. I got to tell you, I'm, you know, if I'm lucky, it's as good looking as Gertrude Stein. It may be worse.
That's great. That's great.
I'm not sure that's great. But I think, you know, when I decided I wanted to write, those were the people who inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's part of what my work as the Muse Charmer is, to help writers kind of discover their own unique voice and their own unique, the book of their heart. Because there's, in a lot of the, especially the fiction writing circles, there's a lot of dismissing when you say, oh, this is the book of your heart. And everybody's like, oh, this is a business. You don't need to have books of your heart. But the truth is if you don't put yourself and your influences and your inspirations into what you're writing, you're really not going to connect with your reader. And it doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. You know, that process is still the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a couple in the chat room. Let's see. Mary Ellen says that her guardian muse looks like the Hierophant from the Vanessa Tarot. Do you know Vanessa Tarot, Mary Wilson?
I don't.
It's a fun deck. It really is. But the thing that I think is very funny is when I see the Hierophant in Vanessa Tarot, she looks a lot like Sarah Palin to me. So, Mary Ellen, take that and run with it however you want. Yeti, who is our producer, says his looks like a long-bearded monk. Kim, also at the Paracounters Network, says that hers look like a frog. Joanne comments that 99.9% of what she writes does come from her heart. The rest comes from her overactive brain. And we have people here who say, you know what, I'm still looking for my muse. I have stories to tell, but don't know how to put them on paper yet. That sounds like exactly the kind of person that should talk to the Muse Charmer. Is that right?
That is correct. And in fact, if you go out to the website bookin12months.com, and that's the number 12, I'm actually working on a new program because I do talk to so many people who have that exact thing. You know, I'm told I should write a book. I feel like I should write a book, but I don't know what to write. And that is actually a new program, and along with the Muse Charmer that I am working with to help people create those books of their heart and to find out exactly what they really, want to write and what they should write.
Okay, I am putting that in the chat room right now. That's BOOKIN number 12months.com.
Yeah.
Is that right? Bookin12months.com. Very good. So here's my question for you. You write under a lot of different names. Does each one have their own guardian muse?
No, it's all the same guardian muse. The names are more influence the flavor of what I write.
Gotcha. So tell us, Mary, altogether, if we count all of your pen names, how many books have you published?
Over 50.
That you have written and published. I'm not saying just what Jupiter Gardens Press has published by other writers. I mean books that you have written and published.
Yes.
Over 50.
Over 50. Now, that's been, over 10 plus years, and most of those are as Mary Winter, my various erotic romances, but yes, over 50.
Wow. So can we talk about the erotic stuff?
Okay.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to get into this. Why? Why erotic romance?
Well, the very first book that I wrote, Ghost Touch, which is out through Jupiter Gardens Press because I reissued it when I got the rights back to it, was about a family tradition witch and a dead FBI agent, the ghost of a dead FBI agent. And when I shopped the book around, and this was, late 90s, early 2000s, well, first of all, back then, paranormal romance was like, oh, we don't write that, where's your billionaire banker's, secret baby book? And I'm like, no, I'm writing about this. Well, basically what I got told was the paranormal elements were okay for the fantasy audience, but a fantasy audience would get turned off by the romance. And this is an agent's words, not mine, but the average, housewife buying Harlequin romances would be turned off by the witch and the ghost aspect. And so I finally, on a group, submitted it to submitted it to a publisher, and they had like a 2.5-3 year lead time. And so it was a paranormal romance group, and I said, hey guys, is this normal? It seems to me that New York doesn't even run this far in advance. And one of the editors of LRS Cave read it and said, well, I'll take a look at it. She read it and bought it, but I had to add sex to the book. It was a romance, but it was more on the sensual, steamy side. It wasn't really erotic. And so once I did that and figured out that that's how I could sell my romance, then I pretty much just developed my own voice. And then I just started having fun with it. I mean, I'm writing about, ghosts and magic. One of my first earliest books was a take on a fairy tale. I mean, it was all these fantastical stories anyway. And so I just thought, why not, and ran with it.
Wow. So, of course I have to ask this. Well, let me see what you think. 50 Shades of Grey. First of all, have you read the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy?
No.
You have not? Okay. I will admit to having read it, and I actually liked it much more than I expected to. I thought it was really good. Now, obviously, that was wildly popular. I guess I have a couple of questions. Have you seen, from a market perspective, have you seen the popularity of that trilogy change the market from your perspective?
I have not seen it, but then I am, on the erotic side, I have been firmly entrenched in the romance side. And I'll say that in general, over the course of my career, I have seen romances get progressively sexier. In fact, my mom gets audiobooks from the Blind Library, and she was listening to a book this afternoon. I was working on my laptop, and she looked at me and she said, "There's a lot of sex in this book." And I went, "Well, okay, who's the author?" And she named the author. It's a mainstream, New York Times bestselling author. And I went, "Oh yeah, I've read her books. They're pretty steamy." And so the actual level of heat that you can put in your romance novel has gotten progressively hotter through the years, and the readers are demanding more and more and more. The books that I wrote back then, like Ghost Touch, is very, very tame compared to today's market. And so the 50 Shades of Grey thing really hasn't changed the romance market. I think it's more of an openness to erotica and more a general public sort of awareness of these things.
Nice. So that's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, next question. And then I'll be done with 50 Shades, I promise.
It's okay.
My understanding of what happened with 50 Shades was it was just erotica like any other erotica, and it just kind of took off. Has that happened with any book you have written or published, and do you anticipate that it could happen? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, marketing is fascinating and frustrating all at the same time. Partly because you can, to some extent, track where your sales come from, but there's no way to track a lot of, social viral word-of-mouth type sales. I mean, you can offer people a website, a coupon code, you can look at your web statistics and see, but, I mean, you can never look dollar for dollar, say, hey, I took out an ad on this website or in this magazine, and see your exact rate of return from that just for various reasons. One of the books I did have published, it's actually still with LRSK, it's called Bjorn's Maid. It's the first book in a series. To this day, I don't know how or why it took off. I can't put my finger on anything, but it's about a polar bear shapeshifter in the Arctic. And it combined a very personal topic for me as far as environmental change and pollution. And then it threw in, these hunky guys that shapeshift into polar bears and a little bit of mysticism. And the book it took off quite wonderfully with LRSK. And I've seen some momentum carry through to the rest of the series, which is published with Jupiter Gardens Press. I always think it can happen. It's a matter of a little bit of luck, timing, knowing your market, and getting out there and having a presence and actually getting the word out about your book, because that's the biggest challenge these days to something taking off, is with the self-published works and with so many publishers out there, there's just simply so many books that it can be very difficult for somebody to be seen among everybody else.
Right. So here's a question for you. You're a small publisher as opposed to, Random House or, one of the big New York publishers or whatever. You're a small publisher. One of the things I really enjoyed about working with you is we very quickly, even though we've never met, and this is only the second time we've ever talked on the phone, I very quickly felt like we developed a personal relationship, and I really appreciated your just how personally you worked with me in editing my books and honestly in teaching me to write. I feel like I'm a much better writer now than I was when I first came to you with my first manuscript. And I appreciate that so much. I get questions from people. I talk to a lot of people who are writing, and the question they're asking me is, what's the difference at this point between going with a small publisher like Jupiter Gardens Press or simply self-publishing with something like Create Space? Can you address that?
Oh, sure. The difference is we do all the stuff that would take the self-publishing writer away from writing. I mean, that's a really simple answer, but the things that an author looking to self-publish, and I can speak to this because technically, because my books go through my own company, I self-publish. I mean, I still utilize editors and, our cover art process and that, but in a sense, I'm self-publishing because it's my own company. The things that we do, for example, the editing, I firmly believe in the adage that money flows towards the writer, so we don't charge for anything, which means that we take a little bit more risk, but we can also be more forgiving, and I'll explain that in a moment. But, we do the editing, we find the cover artists, I upload the books to the distributors. In fact, that's something I personally do within the company. We do the layout, the production, the design, all that stuff that takes the writer away from writing. And if you don't really love that work, as I do, I have a great love of publishing. There is no bigger high for me than, publishing an author's first book and making those dreams come true. That's better than chocolate. It's just wonderful. And so we do all that for them. But the other thing is, too, if you were to self-publish, you'd have to actually pay for an editor. You have to pay for cover art. There's a lot of things that we outlay money for even before we know if the book's going to sell or not. And then to add to that, when I say that we're more forgiving, if you went with some of the larger New York publishers, if your book doesn't sell, they'll drop your contract. I mean, it's heartbreaking, and I've picked up a few books that has happened to them, where I'm never going to tell an author, I'm sorry, you don't sell enough, I'm not going to take your next book. So in that way, we're a lot more forgiving, and I, as an author, coming at this from the author's standpoint, I tend to be very hands-on. I do a lot of, provide a lot of information. I share, the Muse Charmer stuff, which I'll be honest, I charge writers for, but I will freely share what I can share of that with my company just to make sure that, my authors are getting this information. And a good key to that is next week I am hosting the Muse Camp Telesummit, and that website is musecamp.com. And this is a free event, a free sign-up for. And I'm hosting 10 different individuals talking about everything from nuts and bolts of newsletter building to, Twitter for authors. And then I also talk to a couple different authors and publishers. And then I talk to people about gratitude or heart-centered work, finding that book of your heart. And that's something that, there's a way to upgrade from that. And so, but I'm doing all that basically for free for my authors. And so other people can sign up for it for free, but I'm providing additional bonuses to my authors to get that for free. So we provide a lot more information than if somebody just self-published. We lessen the learning curve, I should say.
Well, and to your point, the first manuscript I sent to you was not ready. You know, this was for Fortune Stellar. I think some of you have read Fortune Stellar, and if you haven't, you should, what every professional tarot reader needs to know. And you gave me not only the grammatical stuff that I needed, you also showed me how to turn it into a real book. And I think the second book I wrote was easier on both of us. But there's a difference between writing and writing a book, and that's something that I learned from you in an incredibly hands-on way, and I'll have that with me forever.
Thank you. And that's something that I do for many of my authors. Because as an editor, I read the story, and I mean, first and foremost, I'm reading it for, do I like this? Is this something that I think can sell? But then I'm also looking at it and going, you know, to some extent I'm like, how much work does this need? But then I'm also thinking, can I help this author? And, you know, in the case of Fortune Stellar, I read it. It really resonated with me. It's one of the most favorite books that I have published, and it goes over very well, you know, at pagan festivals as well. It's a wonderful book. But I read it, and I thought, I can help. This is something that I can build on. I can help and actually provide that finesse that, you know, that frankly, to be honest, every author needs. I don't know if I was lucky in this, but I worked through a writer's workshop where, to be honest, they were pretty harsh. I mean, it's my first critique was like, you know, no plot, no characters. What are you doing?
Right. Right.
Oh, yeah. And so, you know, I kind of did some, you know, some hard work there to bring my work up to publishable standards. And I want to help writers along without being quite as direct as that first critique.
Yes, you were very kind. You used words like very serious editing, or I forget what the words were. I've got them written down, though, because when I write my memoirs, when I'm rich and famous, I'm going to use them. But, you know, you made it clear that we had a lot of work to do, and I had to be willing to be flexible, to be open to making it the way it needed to be. But you were very gentle about it. It was really quite good. So there's a question in the chat room that I think is interesting, and this is going back to the fact that you will not take books out of print. And, you know, I know this is heartbreaking, and I know even companies, you know, in the tarot world, our big companies, Llewellyn, U.S. Games, find themselves in the position of having to take books out of print. And it does. It breaks everyone's heart. You don't do that. And a question from Karen in the chat room is this. This is admirable, but what about business? If they don't produce, you can't keep them forever. I think I know the answer to this question, but please, Mary Wilson, would you answer that question? How do you do it?
Oh, sure. Well, and I should clarify, we do not keep books forever. Our contracts are very flexible, and so an author can choose to pursue other avenues should he or she desire. When I say we don't take books out of print, basically with today's technology, I do print on demand for the print books. I do keep a small inventory in my office for books that get sold directly to our website. But to be honest, most of our sales are through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other vendors. And so I don't need to have huge warehouses full of print books to offer to people because I'm not shipping out to big bookstores. And with the e-books, you know, the only physical space and the electronic books are taking up is space on a server somewhere. And so it's not like the physical model where I'm losing money every month because I have to pay X amount of dollars for this corner of a warehouse to keep these books in stock. And so I'm able to go ahead and keep backlist titles in print longer because, first of all, your title may be, 4 or 5 years old, and I see this with my own writing. You know, Ghost Touch is 10 years old, but there's still readers out there who, to them, it's a brand new book because they haven't discovered it yet. And that's when people talking about the long tail of e-publishing, this is exactly what they're getting at, is that because there is no sell-by date, there's no warehouse space, it's not costing anybody any money to have this book for sale because they're not physical goods, then they can stay on the market much longer and reach many more readers.
And, you know, that surprised me very much with Fortune Stellar, which has been out since 2009. And Fortune Stellar is getting a lot of love in the chat room right now, so I want to say thank you to everyone for that. But I would say, and, well, you do the books, Mary, but I would say my Fortune Stellar sales are stronger now than they were when it first came out.
Exactly, yeah. That is one of the titles, but and that speaks a lot to actually your work, because you're out there meeting new people, sharing your vision and your gifts with the world. And so again, even though the book has been out for, you know, a few years, it's still completely brand new to maybe somebody in the chat room this evening who's going, you know, oh, hey, you know, this is the first time I've heard about this book. Let me run over to Amazon and take a look. And yes, I mean, it's a steady seller because you continue to do the work to build that audience. And that's basically the big difference as well between what we do versus self-publishing or New York publishing is I can provide the author the time to build and find that audience, because I'm not looking at, okay, I've got, you know, 20,000 books in a warehouse, they got to move in the next 30 days.
Right, right. So how would you like to see Jupiter Gardens Press grow? Obviously, I mean, I know you're so forthcoming. Anyone who has an idea is welcome to pitch it to you. They don't need an agent. They can just pitch. Is that correct?
That is correct. I do like to see completed manuscripts just because I know myself. In fact, the other day I was going, did I ever finish that book? Oh, look, no, I didn't. So I do like to see completed manuscripts, but our submission guidelines are on the website, and all we ask for is a brief synopsis and the first 3 chapters. Send them in an email, and I'll review them. I actually review all submissions personally, and then I do have editors that read further on. But yeah, I mean, anybody can pitch. I would like to see Jupiter Gardens grow. We've recently consolidated our romance imprints into the main Jupiter Gardens site. And so I'd like to kind of see it grow as a complete publisher. I would definitely welcome and love more new age and metaphysical nonfiction books because, as I said at the start, you know, that's where my heart lies. That's where I kind of got my start with Jupiter Gardens, and I'm always, always, always open to more in that market. But even the fiction books, and I would just like to see it grow to become a solid player in the boutique and small press industry, because we really are a boutique press. I don't want to be putting out, 4 or 5 books a week, because to me that just floods the reader. I'd like to keep our schedule, maybe bump it up to, 2 books or 3 books of different genres to reach different readers a week. We currently do 1 to 2 books a week now. But I'd like to see it grow to basically be the niche place that authors can go to where they know that they can place those books to their heart and they'll be in good hands.
Perfect. Now, there's a question in the chat room, and I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for Mary or for me, 615-692-1262. As you can see, our video's not working the way it usually is, and I put on makeup for you guys and everything. But oh well, that's okay. Our phones are working just fine, 615-692-1262. Please feel free to call in. And Joanne has a question in the chat room. She wants to know, she says she doesn't have an actual manuscript per se, but she has a collections of stories and poems, primarily tarot related, but also very personal. Could that be worked into a book, do you think?
It could be, yes. Something like that could be worked into a book. There would need to be a connection, for example, tarot, or some connection to tie the stories together. And it would be And it would be actually a project that would be very ideally suited for a digital first or small publisher because of its very unique nature. And so, yes, that's a project that could be worked into a book, provided that there's a theme that runs through all the stories and everything kind of ties together.
Nice, nice. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions personally. Obviously, we've had a chance to get to know you as a publisher and as a writer and as the Muse Charmer. But you are such a multifaceted person. I believe we've been seeing a picture of you and your horse, so I know that you're an equestrian person. How did that all come together? We got horses, we've got the pagan Wiccan thing, we've got tarot, we've got publishing, we've got writing. Can you give us the snapshot of how this all came together in the Ozarks?
Well, the Ozarks was kind of the culmination of that dream. I guess it goes back to high school when I was trying to explain to my Algebra 2 teacher that I didn't need algebra because I was going to work on a horse farm and write romance novels for the rest of my life. And she was a little bit startled. She was like, okay, we'll complete the assignment anyway. You never know. But here I am, past high school, and I write and publish romance novels, and while it's not a horse farm, I do live here, on our property with my mom's horse and my horse. So it all kind of worked out. I think it comes back to, it all kind of comes back to the spirituality, because I've always been very nature-oriented. I come from Iowa farm stock, so we've always been very close to the land, very very tied into the seasons and the nature. And so from that, for me personally, the paganism, the Wicca, is a natural outgrowth of that. And so it's just kind of a matter of, following my heart and doing what is true to my authentic self. And that right now, we're living down here on our beautiful property. My uncle just visited, and, he loves it, great fishing. And, I live here. I can sit in my office and I look out the window and there's my horse, which is something I've always wanted, because back in Iowa, she was boarded several miles away. And I'm just out here writing the books I love, publishing wonderful books, and having a blast.
Wow. So, and we've got a lot of people in the chat room saying, good for you. That's a phenomenal life. And I got to tell you, I feel the same way about my life. Being a full-time professional tarot reader, teacher, author down here in Florida. And, is there a connection, do you think, between being a person who has the vision and the courage to kind of live a crazy life like we do, this crazy dream life that we have, and being a magical person, being a spiritual person? Do you think those things go together? And if so, how?
Oh, most definitely. I believe those things go together like peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. I think it's because as magical people, we are given to look at the cycles, at the lessons. We don't see ourselves as leaves on the wind. I mean, we're not blown about. We see that, there's a purpose and a reason for everything. And it's a matter of being able to be in the moment, as well as to be able to step out of the moment, which is a talent that I find goes right along with the magical practice. Because, for example, the way that we ended up down here, I had worked for over 15 years for a big bank. And I'd always say, I was the proverbial someday. Someday we'll live down here in the Ozarks. Someday I'll be a full-time writer. Someday. And the universe finally said, hey, you want to do this, go. And I got laid off. And so it was about this time, getting closer to fall of last year, when I looked at my partner, who's an artist, and I said, you know what, honey? I'm like, there's nothing tying us to Metro Des Moines anymore. If we want to go to the Ozarks, now, the universe has opened a big old door and said, do you have the courage to step through? And thankfully for us, we did. But I think as magical people, to be able to see those signs and to see the cycles and the lessons, and then to believe that we have the power inside of ourselves, the magician card, we are the magicians of our own lives, and then to step into what we want to live.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Love it. And this is nice coming from IG in the chat room. Gratitude, gratefulness, humility, all necessary elements of true spirituality and magic. Very nicely said. So let me ask you just a quick personal question, just out of my own curiosity. I've been noticing in the sort of the larger pagan community, the online pagan community, whatever, there is apparently this rift. And I actually stepped into this rift without realizing it in a blog post about a year ago, and boy, did I catch heck from people. But there's apparently this rift between what they call hard polytheists, people who honor the gods and goddesses as entities outside of themselves and as on some level real, and secular humanist pagans, people who honor nature and honor spirit within themselves, but feel that essentially God, goddess, whatever, is a part of them rather than something external. Have you seen this rift? And in all of that, where does your theology fall?
Wow, what a question.
Yeah.
I think I have not seen the rift, but I will also confess that I've been, rather heads down, nose to the grindstone with things for the last few years, and I have not ventured beyond my own circle of the pagan community that I know and that I work with. As to the question, I see it as a bit of both. And this kind of goes back to my upbringing, which was Christian, is that, if we were all made in the images of God and Goddess, obviously my grandma didn't add that part, but but if we're all made in the image of the divine, then not only is the divine the universe that's out there, but it's also in us, because I tend to believe that we are spirit experiencing a human existence, that there are deities out there. My personal deity, as you can imagine from the picture of me and my horse, is Epona. And so I believe, for example, that Epona exists as a deity, but that I am also a representation of her on the physical realm, especially when I work with my horse and care for her and do training on my horse and that sort of thing. So I tend to believe that we're all the universe expressing itself in different ways, and that includes entities who can be considered as deities as well as ourselves.
Perfect. Beautifully said. You're getting a lot of support in the chat room for that as well. Very, very nicely put. Now, as we come to the end of our time together, I wanted to give you the opportunity to make a plug for whatever. We've talked about Muse Charmer. We've talked about a book in 12 months. We've talked about Muse Camp. We've talked about Jupiter Gardens Press. Take a couple of minutes and tell us what you want us to do.
Okay. Well, if you are writers out there or are thinking about writing a book, I strongly recommend that you sign up for Muse Camp, because it's a free event. We'll be holding one call an evening, and there will be replays available in case you missed the calls, so it's not even something that you have to worry too much about your schedule for. So I do want to encourage people to check out Muse Camp as well as musecharmer.com. But then for everybody, I would love it if you'd visit Jupiter Gardens Press at jupitergardenspress.com and check out not just, our host lovely books, but also everything we have to offer, because we do offer books for just about every reading taste out there, from, serious scholarly nonfiction to fun romance novels.
And let me ask you, you yourself have written a tarot book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I wrote a book called The Fool's Journey Through Sunnydale, which combines two of my loves, tarot and Buffy. And what I do in the book is, it's more of a tarot book than a Buffy book. But I look at the major arcana cards and their meanings and basically filter this television show through their lens. And so I do assign a character for each book, or for each card. And the book basically takes you from the Fool all the way to the World, and then shows you basically who or what in each card, how that relates to the show, and how the show relates to the card. And it was a very tarot-centric show, even if Joss never intended it to be that way.
Right, and I really appreciate that you did that. And again, there's support for you in the chat room, support for Buffy. Buffy was never my thing. I'd like to do the same thing with Grateful Dead songs, but that's a whole other thing. Oh, Mary Ellen has a question. What card is Buffy?
If I remember right, it's been a long time since I wrote the book. I want to say she is Justice.
Well, that would make sense. That would totally make sense. But what I love about what you did, and tarot students, I want you to listen up to this. The exercise that Mary did, taking the Fool's Journey through Sunnydale, this really points out the essence of tarot in many ways, tarot as archetypes. The idea that every epic story, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Buffy, whether it is The Lord of the Rings, whether, any, Don Quixote, you name it, any epic story can be told with the tarot, because the tarot deals with those human archetypes that exist in every epic story and that exist in our stories. And that's what tarot is in many, many ways. And I'm so happy that you put that together like that. I just think that's brilliant.
Thank you. That was one of my books of my heart. That was something that I felt really called to do, that I had to do that.
Absolutely. Well, we have come to the end of our time. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank you, Mary Wilson, for being a part of the show. I hope you will come back again soon.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. It was great. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here. Eric, happy 6-month anniversary to us. And thank you for making something interesting for people to look at, since we couldn't get my camera to work today. I want to let you guys know that next week we will have Mariana Abuzara on the show with us. And Mariana is what I call a Renaissance woman. She is an astrologer. She's a tarotist. She is an archer. She is a radio host. She does all kinds of things. She's in Vermont. I've known Mariana for many, many years. She used to travel with Christiana's Psychic and New Age Fair way back in the day in Connecticut and Massachusetts as our fair astrologer. Many years have passed since then, but she has agreed to come on the show and let us know what she's up to. So that's next week. I want to remind you that I am available for readings and tarot mentoring, and that I have a whole series of tarot webinars. TarotByChristiana.com gets all of that to you. Don't forget to like our show on Facebook, Christiana's Psychic Cafe, And we will see you right back here next week. Have a safe and wonderful holiday, and have a great week.